All right, Coogs House. That so that really just happened, huh?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, a podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're U of H fan or taking us by, please be sure to subscribe. We bring the latest on the Cougs in your news feed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen today. And if you're finding this first, you are finding us on YouTube. Thanks. Remember to get subscribed and get to 2,000 subscribers before TCU give away a jersey. Now, I talked really fast through that because it kind of felt like he needed to go through the normal rigmarole and opening and all of that. But it feels awkward to open with the normal rigmarole and all that. That was not a normal football game. I don't mean like not normal in the cool, funky, weird. Yeah, no, like that was bogus. I want to talk to a couple things about what happened in this game. So before we get too terribly far into this, let's back up and talk about what we're going to talk about, I guess. I do want to go over like what just happened. And then I want to talk some in the second segment about like, was there some shift? I mean, obviously the offense like woke up at some point, and was that intentional? And then I do want to take a look around the Big 12 to kind of see, after losing to Rice, what are we up against, right? What are we looking at here in this first season? Obviously we are live. That means there will be comments throughout the show. I don't know that I can get to all of those kinds of things, but thank you all for being here live and looking and watching this. Now, I got to talk about what happened to kind of go through the game, because it just happened. And so we all just saw it, I guess, but some people might have tuned in late or whatever. Rice did reel off with 4 touchdowns in their first 4 possessions. And frankly, in their first 5 possessions of the game that took up the whole first half, they got down into the red zone. Malik Fleming picked up. Malik Fleming picked off the ball. No, it wasn't Malik Fleming. Who was that interception? It was it Isaiah? Isaiah Hamilton picked it off in the end zone. And otherwise, that was, again, another touchdown drive. I say that to say, while I hope that you excuse my little bit of a bummer mood here, that was not the way you'd expect to kick off a rivalry game in a very highly anticipated year in the Big 12, right? Like, obviously, Rice is not that team in the Big 12. That team comes next week, and maybe there's some element of a trap game this week. There was this week to talk about going into next week, but you have no energy to open up with Rice on offense or defense. You go down 28-0 in the first half. And frankly, during the 28-0 stretch, it felt like Rice kind of got to do whatever they want, right? And that's really, really depressing and upsetting. Now, I think that we can all acknowledge there's a couple things going on here. First, like, that's my baby monitor, if you heard that. I'm sorry about that. I have to say, first and foremost, that like, this is not an excuse, but like JT Daniels and Rice, I guess, could make some noise this year. They kind of picked apart the secondary as they wanted to in the first half. The TV view is not quite zoomed out enough to see all the downfield unwrapping of things, but it did look like basically whenever JT Daniels hit the middle of the field in that like 15 to or maybe 10 to 20 yard area, there was somebody open. Now, I will say that did get cleaned up by whatever happened at halftime. The second half defense looked better, but that raised the question as to what happened in the first place. After scoring 28 points in their first 4 drives, Rice did not score again until overtime, and I think it's a fair question to ask what changed or shifted there. To me, there was a couple personnel things that happened in the back half. You saw a lot more of Hamilton out there. Hogan rotated in some at the other side, and then you had Fleming in more of a slot nickel kind of guy. And I don't mean to talk down on the kids that were playing the other spots, but that was what it looked like happened a lot more in the second half. The other thing I'll say in the second half is the pass rush got after it more from a personnel standpoint. In that, I don't know there was a whole lot of shifting as much as it was like other folks besides Nelson Caesar came to play in the second half, right? And that may have to do with some second half coaching, talking to him at halftime, yelling, chewing people out, Offensively, I don't think anemic is too nice a word. On offense in the first half, they honestly, they came out and threw an interception. Admittedly, and I defend like when quarterbacks get hit and throw a pick, it's like, well, they could have not gotten hit, right? And like that would involve protection and that kind of stuff. But they open up an interception, that's not great. Then a 3-and-out, and then an 8-and-out. I guess they went 11 yards, so it was like a long first down, and then a 3-and-out after that. They got a touchdown in the I guess was that fourth series late in the half. There was like 3 minutes left after they scored, and there was a giant chunk play involved in that too. Because otherwise it felt like they were never going to chip away in the first half. It was like they're going to have to big play out athlete Rice. And that's a shame because truthfully, you think that when you have an offensive mind like Dana Holgorsen on your staff, because I maintain that if he got fired tomorrow, there would theoretically be, I don't know, over 100 schools asking him to come coach their offense right away because of his involvement in the early stages of the air raid, right? Now, that's not what we're seeing. They're doing a little bit more of the run side of the air run and gun kind of stuff. And frankly, I don't mind running the quarterback down the stretch. I think we all saw how effective that can be in the second part of the game. But that takes like some like gumption and like a little bit of swag almost that was missing in the first half. So if that's who you're going to be, you got to get off the bus like that, right? It's a rough way to go about it. Statistically, before we wrap up this first segment, because I've dawdled too long, Donovan Smith was 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, interception. Tony Mathis, I guess, led the way rushing with 60 yards, but truthfully, it was very much a multi-person effort. Parker Jenkins got in there, showed a little bit. Stacey Sneed got the last couple carries. Donovan Smith got the bulk of the important carries. They added up to about 180 yards. Receiving the ball, I was impressed again by Sam Brown. Stats showed that as well. 9 catches for 138 yards. I only remember 1 or 2 targets that wouldn't have gone down in his hands. At some point, we'll talk about like how defenses are playing Matthew Golden differently, but tonight doesn't seem like the night for that. Tonight does not seem like the night for X's and O's. In this moment, we'll talk a little bit more about like the emotions of it. We can get to X's and O's later once we have some time to digest film. I guess that's the offensive statistics. On the team side of things, it's going to look like we look at like the basic team stats, like Houston was like in a tough game because the second half was so different. But really, I think I speak for everyone listening to this live and everyone listening to this later, that the team stats by the end of the game do not give credit to what was actually happening there, right? Like Houston technically had more first downs than Rice. Would anyone listening say that felt like they had more first down than Rice over the course? Like there was never this like feeling like, oh yeah, we're finally like it didn't come out that way. Houston technically they had 30 less yards, right? They were right there, right in the same ballpark, but it never felt like that because Houston did all of their offense so late. There was a moment I have to admit in the second half where I thought there was going to be a repeat of the Memphis game from last year, or any, I guess, version of the cardiac Cougs when we go back to the comebacks and those kinds of things in the past. I think the difference is a year ago, if you had told me that Houston has to come back against Memphis, I was like, Memphis isn't a terrible team. That's fine. Or, if they get stuck in a high-scoring game with SMU last year, Tana Mordecai is fine, whatever. Rashee Rice is a pro, right? The difference here is this is Rice. And I admit that Luke McCaffrey continues to impress and that JT Daniels has the resume he did. However, they've got a lot of other guys on the football team that made plays tonight, and that's really, really discouraging. And the guys made plays on both sides of the ball. We knew the D-line was going to get after it a little bit from Rice because they got after Texas a little bit the last week, and that seems to be a strength of their team. But on the whole, it's not a Big 12 football team should have more time to throw the ball, right? And that's where we'll leave that. We'll get to more like personnel and those kinds of things if they can't come up. I do want to jump into the second segment and talk about one coaching move that I think already happened. It might not be the one I think some of you are asking for. I'll go back to one of the early comments from Steve here. Said that he is waiting for a Joe Duarte tweet that probably won't come, but would be really nice if it did. I don't think that's what's coming either, but I do think there's something coming soon. But first, we got to talk about our buddies at Nutrafol. Now, let me tell you, I know I'm wearing a hat right now. I wear a hat most days because I am going a little thin up top like most people are, but I'm getting involved with this company named Nutrafol because they've got a great product and they really are doing wonders for the spot right here. Now, if I take my hat off, it's going to be reflective off the lights above me, right? But Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, and science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/med to take their hair wellness quiz. Identify the causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair and health through the whole body wellness. Take a first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONCollege. All right. So I want to talk some about play calling, because I think decisively we can now say, since middle of the second quarter of the Rice game, at least tonight, hopefully going forward, Dana Holgorsen is back in charge of this was funny, sorry, from Pocket Sand asking if I have a soul because I have red hair if my hair comes back. I don't know. Tonight I feel somewhat soulless after that Rice game. So I will say that I think Dana Holgorsen took over play calling. And I think there's a couple demonstrable elements that show that. And before we get into what made me think that, I guess I should say, and watching things, and that may be the Duarte tweet we see, is that someone admits that that's what happened. What I do think happens is eventually we have to ask why it takes so long for this to happen, right? Like, why did it take until fourth quarter of Memphis a year ago? Why did it take until losing to Texas Tech the year before? Why does it take these moments where kind of our back gets pressed up against the wall and suddenly we can't figure it out, or we have to just like rely on Dana to call the plays? And why isn't that just the MO from the start? Or if that's not going to be the MO, why are we going with guys that can't call plays very, very well? I will say that it felt like, assuming Coach Mike Burchett, the quarterback coach who called plays in the first game, as was reported before the game kicked off, if he also called plays tonight against Rice, I think it is fair to ask, what was the game plan behind throwing him to the fire like that in game one in general? Because he clearly, while he had a year of calling plays, it looks like on his resume, at a much smaller institution under his belt, he was not prepared for the task, right? He wasn't in sync with what Dana wanted to do. And so Dana took possession of it in the middle of the second quarter, it looked like to me tonight. Now, I will say, once Dana took control, it looks like to me they basically scored a touchdown every drive after that, because I saw him taking control of the plays somewhere in the late first quarter. We started seeing a lot more of what I want to call like odd formations. Not odd and like odd and even. Odd as in like trips bunch, but the bunch is really, really spread out far away from the ball, like way, way off the line of scrimmage from the ball. Or you start seeing, a smaller, skinnier slot guy as the two up backs that are almost like H backs in the backfield. Or you start seeing man jack in motion one way. Like, different things started happening as far as personnel movements and lineups and stuff like that. And those are things Dana has done since his first time in Houston, right? Those were things that he was doing back then. And I wonder if the impetus of this is he knows if he loses like he's in this middle of the second quarter and he knows in his head, if I lose this Rice game, we're all in trouble. And so that's when he takes over, right? I just wonder why it takes those moments. But other things that, I guess, tell me down below. You guys are talking about whether or not I have a soul because I have red hair. Tell me down below, what do you think the reasoning is for waiting to make himself the play caller until later? What's the cause of that? I feel like, as I looked at it, the interesting to me is you saw a lot more of rub route concepts, not because it becomes a failed play in the second overtime, but the scissor concept on the arrow, the deep flag route that gets Matthew Golden open the corner of the end zone for a beautiful touchdown catch early, comes back to not be a catch in the second overtime. But that is the kind of stuff that Dana did a lot in his air raid days, where you just match up man coverage and just rub guys off one another because you have an underneath route coming down with a quick slant. The coverage guys kind of either bump each other or avoid each other and slow themselves down. It's a very, very simple thing. The other thing he did that I thought was interesting and that I'm a fan of, that I don't know why they didn't do more of is honestly a lot of I'm calling it box read RPO, meaning he's not reading. Donovan Smith, as the quarterback, is not reading mid-play what to do, but he is looking at the box or he's looking at the coverage or whatever pre-snap based on their alignment and going with things. And so I think that part of me wants to say, like, that is honestly what happened in the last play of the game. So if we're going to break down the last play of the game. What Houston been doing at that point is lining up with a pass concept on one side and a run concept on the box or inside on the other. And Donovan Smith appeared to be making the play or making the decision based on what they lined up in. I think you see this a couple times earlier in the game where Donovan Smith is running a quarterback design run play with pullers and lead blockers and so on. And on the backside, if you just pay attention, you've got guys also running routes, running simple bubble screens, quick slants and arrows and those kind of like basic things. And he's reading the box to see, okay, how many hats do we have blocking? How many hats do they have in here? And can I create an advantage here? If I have an advantage, I'm keeping and running the ball. If I don't, I'm spinning out to Sam Brown. Sam Brown had a great day, right? Manjack had a drop that I don't think he normally has. And honestly, like, it makes me want, like, I know we don't wear gloves and it's a very cool thing, but like, it looked like the kind of catch that, that he would have gotten if he'd had gloves on. And so with that said, the final play of the game, everyone's wondering why, after so much success running the football with the quarterback, or even with Stacey Sneed, why from the 3-yard line are they throwing the football? But in quickly looking at the play, and because NFL Network is funky with their rights and stuff, we don't have the picture to pull up. But if you have it recorded at all, go back and watch. I count what I'm calling 7.5, almost like a guy is near the edge of the box, 8 guys-ish in the box. And what Donovan Smith does is he sees that. He says he has kind of 6 guys blocking because one of his own guys is at the edge of the box. We'll call it 6.5 guys. And that means they're outnumbered. That's why he runs the pass. That's why he elects to do the pass play. Now, in running this offense as a veteran, would you hope that the point becomes that, like, you'd hope that at some point, obviously, like, he makes the read, like, okay, yes, it's going to be a short run, but it's only from the 3-yard line. I can get that, right? Yes, that's, I think, the thing that I intuitively want him to be able to do is, like, yes, the box read says this, but as an athlete, I might get tackled, but I can get those 3 darn yards, right? Instead, he says the box read does this. He throws the jump ball out to Matthew Golden. Jump balls are 50-50. We got the one earlier. We don't get that one, right? Like intellectually, I understand what happened. Emotionally, I'm like, tuck the dang football and run it. Like, the run play was set up. It was all there. You've done it before. He's a giant. He's big, strong, and fast. Yes, I think he has a better arm than he gets credit for, but yes, that's what he should have done. Now, I will say that there's a couple different things to factor in here. As someone points out, Emiliano right here points out that there was a penalty called on the Rice 2-point conversion, gave them the second chance, and they scored on it. And what Emiliano is not pointing out, but I will, is had that penalty been correctly not called, Houston doesn't need the 2-point conversion. They might still be playing, right? As we're sitting here talking, they might still be playing. Instead, that's not the way it went. I could belabor and freak out about penalties, and I'm not saying I don't get pissed about them, but at the end of the day, it's also not, that's not what happened, right? Like, the reality is Houston went on the field on offense knowing they had to score 8 points, and they didn't. And that's, frankly, a problem. This was a funny comment. Steve says that by the transfer property of sports, Rice is better at football than Baylor. That would be cool that this is a Rice podcast, but I did chuckle at it. I'm going to admit, Steve, internally, I chuckled a little bit at that. I look around the offense, though, and think, what's the deal with Matthew Golden? Maybe later this week we'll talk about, like, why is he getting taken away by defenses so easily? What is happening in those instances? On the flip side of that, Sam Brown is having a great year, right? And so maybe we need to find stuff that features him more, like on that rub concept that we threw the jump ball to Matthew Golden. Should we somehow, like, slightly adjust who lines up where and get Sam Brown to rub open for the slant underneath it or something like that, right? Should we be working more towards those kinds of things in the long term? We can get there later this week, but right now it's hard to get past what just happened. The third segment is going to be a little bit more of an emotional look around the Big 12 because that's where the feelings just go. Because we're going to look at how much fun other teams had tonight and how little fun we had. But first, we should probably tell you that if you are looking for tickets to TCU next week, and admittedly, those might be really cheap in about an hour, Gametime is going to help you find an even better deal. Now, Gametime is the place for you to find last-minute tickets. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, getting exclusive deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concert, comedy, theater, and all the other things that you want to do to take your mind off of things like this Houston Cougar loss. The Gametime guarantee means that you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same location or the same section and row for less. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your tickets or the seats before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. It's just 2 taps from their app. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you don't have to dig through an email. You can snag the tickets without the stress of Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And, who knows, in an hour, that might cover your whole Houston versus TCU ticket. We'll see. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, in looking around the Big 12, I'd like to do, if we do more of these live shows post game, and tell us what you think. I'd like to, if we have time to do these, and if I can finagle doing this with a 3-month-old who is squirming as I look at his squirming self on my camera right here. I will say that I'd like to look at the Big 12 because it's an exciting conference to be joined, and that's part of the excitement of this season. However, after losing to Rice tonight, I have to say that there are some results in looking around the Big 12 that are kind of hard to swallow. Now, you've heard me say several times that I think Texas loses games this year that they should not lose to people in our conference. I think one of those could be Houston, and I really it's just Texas. They're going to lose games they shouldn't lose, right? I have to say that they didn't tonight. They beat Alabama. As I was told in a group chat by Juan, who I think I saw in the chat earlier, that just means we beat them. It's that much funnier, and that's fair. Again, I don't question their talent. I question them because they're Texas, and they always lose people they shouldn't lose to. Baylor represents a place we could be. Baylor's in a much worse spot. As Steve, who talked about Rice earlier, mentioned, Baylor's lost 6 in a row dating back to last year. They lost the last 4 of the season, and have lost 2 in a row to start this season. I'm not a math teacher, but that's 6. I teach history, not math, right? As I look at the whole conference, though, like Oklahoma handily beat SMU. Kansas State whooped up on Troy. Cincinnati beat a fellow P5 in Pittsburgh, right? Central Florida beat Boise State in a close one. Texas Tech lost to Oregon. What other notable ones are here? I guess currently, as it's playing on the TV next to me, Oklahoma State's losing to Arizona State. It's just interesting to look across the thing. Next week's opponent, TCU, smashed Nichols. So obviously they didn't get trap gamed, and we might have. As I look at the conference as a whole and trying to figure out where Houston fits in, Houston definitely and decisively has the worst loss of anyone in the conference. Like, I think Iowa stinks, and Iowa State lost to Iowa, but Iowa doesn't Rice stink, right? That's not how that goes. Houston definitively has the worst loss in the conference tonight or this week, and that I think raises an interesting question because people are commenting, whether it's Joe or someone earlier commented about like a potential Duarte tweet or whatever. People are commenting about firing Dana Holgorsen. Now, I am not saying he's an infallible coach. I am not saying that he made a ton of great decisions tonight or leading up to tonight or what have you. I am saying I wouldn't hold your breath for a number of reasons. One, I bet after tonight, after frankly giving it 28 points in the first half to Rice, you could see a lot more commentary about the defense, and you could see a lot more commentary about stepping that up. The defense was in question a lot last year. Frankly, the defense gave up way too many yards to a Rice offense that, again, while they have JT Daniels, is still a Rice offense across the board. Like, he has to throw it to a guy who majority Rice guys. It has to get pass protected by Rice pass protection and those kinds of things. He made us look a little bit silly tonight with 400 yards passing, right? Like, Rice going for 400 yards passing is going to be the kind of thing that brings defenses into question. SMU last year scoring 77 points, or a bad Texas Tech team the year before, or whatever. Like, all those games are going to add up to asking questions. Now, Steve points out that this is not a vacuum. The only good year was that 2021 season. They went 12-2. I understand that, but I'm talking through like how the dominoes of this go, right? You look at like how coaches get fired elsewhere. Typically, coaches with the big paydays, and Holgorsen's making a decent sized chunk of money. Typically, they find other ways to finagle out of this. They'll do something along the lines of like say, Dana's contract now has to include that he is calling the plays. He can no longer pass that duty off. Or you'll find something about like, getting rid of Belk and saying, if the defense could just get the ball turned over more or whatever. Because last year, they didn't turn the ball over a lot, right? Or whatever, right? And those kinds of things will happen. The funny thing about that is that like throughout this entire Dana Holgorsen experience, while you could talk about the defense as a whole for a lot of the time, you could also point to the defensive line, weirdly, as being one of the best units to produce this pros year in, year out. It's consistently dominating and at right times. And frankly, like Nelson Caesar, for as bad as the defense played in the first half, which ultimately made them like an average game, I guess, by the end of it, Nelson Caesar had himself a ball game. Felt like he had a really, really good football game. I wouldn't be surprised if his Pro Football Focus scored really, really high. He seemed to be in the right place at the right time all the time. Exception of like one play he rushed down the middle of a tackle, of an offensive tackle. Now, if that Duarte tweet or whatever were to come, and I guess I should probably check Twitter as I'm talking to make sure it hasn't come or anything like that has come. I do think they're probably in the post game right now. I have to say that, remember, and asking for that kind of a thing, there are a lot worse options. There are some better ones. There are a lot worse options. And what do you have to do to go get those folks and those kinds of things? Are you going to take people point to like the UTSA guy, Coach Traylor, who Houston has beat twice in a row, I would point out. But he's a 55-year-old guy that feels a lot like Dana. He's just been in high school for a long time, right? Like, how different are those kinds of things? I don't know. I will say that the second half, when I was feeling like this is going to be the Memphis game 2.0, I was riding high. Part of this is a fun thing to ride. But at the end of the day, there are problems with this football team. There were problems with this football team against UTSA that they did not fix yet. And there are problems with this football team they still have to fix. Now, I don't think I'm the only post-game coverage going, but I'm going to get to my squirming 3-month-old and think about this over the course of Sunday. And we'll be back again to talk on Monday morning. I highly recommend a handful of other podcasts going on right now for the late night post-game stuff. Keep this thing going. Frankly, having a large fan base that cares is one of the first steps to getting these kinds of things fixed. So continue to show you care, continue to show up, and continue to be vocal about those kinds of things. And we'll see what kinds of things get moving. Sunday, typically I rewatch the game, and I really don't even want to rewatch the game tomorrow. I don't want to rewatch. All right, so I'm gonna log off. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight, making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the night. As far as the conference goes, Locked On Big 12 is doing a great job covering the whole thing. I don't think the whole thing will be about Texas. They probably do have a first segment about Texas. Make sure you go check out them for a second listen. Hear how the rest of the conference is doing. Locked On Cougars, primary Locked On Podcast Network, and that means your team every day, even on the hard days. Go Cougs.